Willard was trapped in a cage, forced to play Kurtz's game, and Coppola was trapped in the jungle, forced to play Brando's. And somewhere on set, a clock was ticking, time was running out. If they didn't break for lunch soon, the production would be penalized. Assistant director Jerry Zeismer was watching the minutes tick down. They were behind schedule again, and Brando, he was nowhere near ready. By the time we reached this part of the story, Brando had already hijacked the movie. He'd shown up overweight, having not read Heart of Darkness. He refused to shoot. Instead, he spent several of his limited days talking with Coppola, scrapping the original plans and redefining who Kurtz even was. During the shoot, he pranked the crew relentlessly, knowing full well he couldn't be fired. He'd disappear without warning, just to mess with them. One day, when there was a knock on his houseboat door, he quietly slipped over the side, waded through the river, and waited atop the temple steps, radioing the confused second AD trying to bring him to set.
Looking for someone?
Another time, during a lighting setup, he climbed up a water tower and just watched as the crew frantically searched for him. But now it was time to shoot a scene that would wind up on the cutting room floor, where Kurtz confronts Willard in a bamboo cage, a scene improvised by Brando and rehearsed with Coppola, one that would contain a hidden clue to what Kurtz was really doing. Because at the same time Brando was shaping the movie, Kurtz was shaping Willard, molding him, but not into a follower, something else. Zeismer checked his watch, seeing the seconds tick closer and closer to a penalty. Everyone was waiting on Brando, who was slowly writing his lines on the bamboo bars, one at a time. But this moment wasn't just a prank. Brando wasn't stalling, he was taking control. And in the scenes that follow, he takes all of it. Zeismer couldn't take it anymore. "Okay, that's lunch," he said. Brando looked up, smirked, and said, "Why'd you do that? I was just about ready."
Your character provides the comic relief, like, Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now.
Terminate. With extreme prejudice. Are you an assassin? A soldier?
The photojournalist hikes up to the temple, where dozens of corpses lie among 5 bamboo cages, each just big enough for a person to stand in. Quick correction, spotted by series superfan Jacob Juice. In episode 20, I misread a passage thinking that Sheen's heart attack came directly after shooting this scene, when it was actually 6 months later. The author was suggesting that scenes like this contributed to the heart attack. So Willard is locked in a bamboo cage, but who built it? The answer is almost too perfect. The same Ifagawa Tribe who played Kurtz's army on screen built the cages in real life, at Coppola's direction, just like Kurtz would have. In the movie, Willard is trapped by Kurtz's followers, but in reality, Merton Sheen was trapped by the same people. The Ifagawa also carved the temple's totems and lived on set, bringing their culture to the production and embodying Coppola's belief that the actors should live their parts. The photojournalist arrives trying to convince Willard that Kurtz is a great man.
I mean, what are they gonna say, man, when he's gone, huh? Because he dies when it dies, man. When it dies, he dies.
But this moment originally came after a scene where Kurtz confronts Willard. The editors struggled to cut together Brando's scenes, which could explain why this was removed.
Cutting the material, in a sense, isn't that difficult because you do have, for the most part, a coherent scene. The exception to that, I think, was really the Brando material, which was less planned out. Although basically written, it was much more improvisational.
I actually think it was removed because it gave too much away, and when you see what's in it, you'll understand why. It opens with 2 kids casually playing on Willards Cage, totally unfazed by the corpses and torture around them. That's Kurtz's world, a world where children are raised in violence so extreme it feels normal, which to Kurtz is exactly how you win a war. Nearby, 2 of Kurtz's men speak in their native language. One relays it to Kurtz in French. Brando reads a cue card, but in French. Turn her upside down and put her head in a sack of ants. Then ask after a while. Be sure the others see her. The French was meant to hint at Vietnam's colonial history, especially since the French plantation sequence was already expected to be cut. But it was tough to film. The Ifagawa had a hard time reacting to English, let alone Brando speaking in French. And when you're trying to wrangle Marlon Brando, that's a problem. Remember, this was the same day that Brando was slowly writing his lines on the bamboo bars. Someone is executed off screen. Kurtz tells Willard the prisoners are interfering with his plans by withholding information. And what happens next, I believe, is possibly the reason this scene was cut.
If I were to give you this weapon, would you kill me?
Yes.
Right there. The entire Kurtz sequence hinges on the question, will Willard decide to kill Kurtz? And if so, how?
On the river, I thought that the minute I looked at him, I'd know what to do. But it didn't happen.
There's so much more suspense if we don't even know whether he wants to. When Willard is about to arrive at the Kurtz compound, he destroys the dossier and his narration says,
Part of me was afraid of what I would find and what I would do when I got there. I knew the risks, or imagined I knew, but the thing I felt the most, much stronger than fear, was the desire to confront him.
He's been an assassin before.
Did you not assassinate a government tax collector? Quan Tri Province, June 18, 1968.
How many people had I already killed? There were those 6 that I knew about for sure, close enough to blow their last breath in my face.
He found it easy enough to kill rather than slow down his mission. But what's the difference with Kurtz?
But this time, it was an American and an officer. That wasn't supposed to make any difference to me, but it did.
When Kurtz asks Willard why he would kill him, he says,
Because of what you're doing here.
You've seen all this before, Captain.
Not like this.
Captain.
Kurtz asks if Willard is afraid to see something in himself that he didn't know was there. When Willard doesn't respond, Kurtz compares him to the master liars in Washington, men who want to win the war but don't want to be thought of as cruel. They call themselves moral, civilized, ethical, but out here in the jungle, those words are meaningless. But you might not realize there's another hidden layer to this deleted scene that we'll revisit later.
Most of it didn't make it into the final cut. There was language in what Marlon Brando wrote that any writer would be envious of, but any writer.
Then we cut to what's in the final film, Willard and the photojournalist. The photojournalist rambles about how great Kurtz is, trying to sway Willard to his side.
What are they gonna say about him? What are they gonna say? He was a kind man? He was a wise man?
But here's what was cut. He also wants to take a photo of Kurtz. If he does, he'll be killed.
I came here and like to take a photograph of the man. Just one photograph. I haven't even taken it yet. You understand what I mean? And he'll kill me if I take it.
Likely setting up the deleted scene where, well, he is killed for taking Kurtz's picture.
I took his picture, man. And he knows it. He knows it. He's gonna kill me, man. I'm dead. That's it. The word's out right here, right now, anytime.
What happens next is an 11-minute sequence so insane that I can't imagine why they ever thought the whole thing would wind up in the movie. But before we get into that, a quick message from our sponsor. Every night, once my wife and 2-year-old are asleep, I like to pull the recliner in front of the TV, put on some headphones, and watch a movie before bed.
You're gonna have to sleep sometime, McCready.
I'm a real light sleeper, child.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I'm a light sleeper too. Ever since I can remember, it's always taken me like 2 hours to fall asleep, and I wake up over and over again throughout the night. But for the past few months, I've finally been getting some good sleep. Now I have a little ritual. I pause the movie, take an intermission, and make a warm cup of Beam Dream. You know that feeling of looking forward to your coffee or tea in the morning? It's like that, but for nighttime. Except instead of waking you up, it has magnesium, L-theanine, and reishi mushrooms to melt the weight of the day and actually help you relax before bed. But the best part? It doesn't just help me fall asleep, it actually helps me stay asleep and wake up feeling refreshed, without the grogginess that comes with taking tons of melatonin or a sleeping pill. And I was shocked that there's no sugar in this. It tastes like there is. And there's no dairy either, which is great for me because I can't have any. I just make mine with oat milk, and the frother makes it super creamy. I've tried a lot of the flavors, but I have to say that my favorite is definitely blueberry crumble. It kind of tastes like cereal milk. Prioritize your sleep for a productive and healthy year with up to 35% off of Dream by Beam. Just use code CinemaTyler at checkout. Then we get a crazy 11-minute scene from the Workprint that was too insane even for the deleted scenes collection. When you see it, you'll see why. Willard, trapped in his cage, is paraded like a trophy. Kurt's men sing, chant, and throw a speared fish inside. The cage tips. He's carried through the jungle. Then, pure madness. A child blows bubbles. A pig is prepared for slaughter. An Ifagawa elder taunts Willard with a knife. And here we can see Coppola demonstrating what to do. There's lots of behind-the-scenes footage of the scene. And look at this guy in the white shirt having a great time. Lance smokes a cigar and joins in, poking at Willard with a spear. There's some good shots of him by Chaz Gerritsen in his tribal makeup. There was also an ambitious 3-minute shot that was done 10 times of Willard strapped to an altar with horns, and that didn't even make it into the workprint. The only glimpse we get is in Hearts of Darkness.
I don't know what's happening, you know that? But it's wonderful, it's wonderful.
According to Eleanor Coppola, during post-production, they decorated part of their land in Napa, California with totems, carved heads, and a fire pit for pickup shots of Willard in captivity. But did any of it make it into the movie? No idea. And get this, some people riding through the area on horseback saw the bizarre setup and called the sheriff, convinced there was a Manson-like group living there.
Hello, almighty. This is EBR Street Gang.
Assistant Director Jerry Zeismer heard someone shouting, "No, not Chef! Not Chef!" It was Frederick Forest. He'd just learned that his character was going to die. By this point, especially with Brando on set, the script was constantly changing. The actors had been living in the jungle for 6 months, becoming their characters. And Chef? Forrest was Chef, and now they were killing him off. Zeismer saw Forrest break down. He was sobbing, trying to get away from Coppola. "Chef is not going to die, goddammit!" Then, right on cue, a special effects guy walks up holding Chef's fake severed head. Forrest just lost it.
I've had the whole goddamn fucking shit, man! Just get my ass to the county quick, cause I'm fucking out!
He had to be restrained and taken off set. But eventually, he made peace with it. On his waiver, dated October 3rd, Forrest even joked, provided you use my good side in the scene where my head is cut off with Marty. In the movie, you only see the dummy head for a second. The rest of the scene, that's not a prop. That's Forrest playing his own severed head. And yeah, I guess it is his good side. This Time magazine scene, cut from the theatrical version and restored in Redux, hides an interesting clue about Kurtz, if you actually read the article. Willard wakes up in near total darkness, locked in a real shipping container that was used to haul supplies to the location, but now it has been transformed into a prison by production designer Dean Tavoularis, who carves slits into the walls with a blowtorch to let light in, and it works. Storaro used the contrast of light and shadows to represent the conscious and unconscious. Willard's trapped, drained, lost in doubt after the long journey here, just like Martin Sheen, who's been through his own personal hell, only to land opposite his hero, Marlon Brando, trapped in a story with no clear end. This scene begins with tiny faces pressed against the slits in the container. Then Kurtz appears among them. His expression is curious, almost childlike. It's a sharp contrast to the last time we saw him, covered in war paint and dropping Chef's severed head into Willard's lap. I think this works thematically to show the contrast that Kurtz will talk about later in his monologue, about the men with love in their hearts who have the strength to do something horrifying for what they see as the greater good. Kurtz swings open the door, letting light in, and then sits to read from a Time magazine article. Again, we see a brilliant contrast. Willard, shrouded in darkness, sweaty, and looking close to death, compared to Kurtz, in the light, comfortable, surrounded by children and fresh green plants. On the surface, it seems like a quiet moment, and a strange one. Why is Kurtz reading from a magazine article? Kurtz reads from a real 1967 Time magazine article about Vietnam, propaganda that America is winning the war even if the American public doesn't want to believe it.
The American people may find it hard to believe that the U.S. is winning the war in Vietnam.
I managed to find the actual article, and interestingly, he skips over a sentence explaining why the public is disillusioned. It reads, "They have, after all, been ladled too many oversanguine assurances in the past, only to be confronted later with the familiar due bills of heavier manpower commitments, steeper costs, and higher casualties." Kurtz only quotes the lines that make the US look absurdly confident, leaving out the part where the article admits rising casualties and other reasons for public mistrust. Kurtz mocks the American military's insistence that they are winning the war in Vietnam, showing Willard that these are the people who sent him to assassinate someone whose effectiveness can't be questioned.
And he kept winning it his way.
Montagnard army of his.
And they called me in.
How do they smell to you, soldier?
I put a link to the full article in the description so you can read it at your leisure. And here's a part that was cut from the scene.
Not long ago, a presidential aide mused, "The reports from the field are so incredibly good that we don't talk about them, we don't dare."
Brando enjoyed hanging around and being playful with the children of the Ifagawa Tribe. Seeing him try to wrangle 20 of these kids who didn't speak a word of English during the scene was hilarious to assistant director Jerry Zeismer. Zeismer remembered Brando trying to read the article during the scene and then saying to a 4-year-old, "Hey, don't stand in front of me, get back here." And then he'd start again and another kid would wander and he'd say, "Get back over here, where are you going? You see that camera? Stay back."
30 seconds. Where he could simply be unable to continue fighting. And communist guerrillas.
Willard, barely alive, is taken to the temple where he sees the people guarding Kurtz as he paces through shafts of light. One of these people is apparently supposed to be Kurtz's Montagnard wife. Photographer Chaz Gerritsen took some photos of her in what looked like some scenes that didn't make it into the final film. Maybe she had a bigger role that was removed. We also later see her quiet reaction to Kurtz having been killed. Coppola filmed so many ideas for the Kurtz sequence that the Workprint version of the sequence was over an hour longer than the sequence in even the Redux cut. But one scene that stayed in every version of the movie is Kurtz reading The Hollow Men by T.S. Eliot. But why? What's so important about this poem?
We're the hollow men. We're the stuffed men.
Originally, Kurtz was supposed to quote history. John Milius had written a speech about the Mongols, how they march in a circle, kill everything, and leave only one survivor at the end. That speech didn't disappear, it ended up in Milius's Red Dawn.
Now, the great hunt would always begin with the army spread out in a semicircle, I would say about the size of Rhode Island.
But Milius's Genghis Khan-style Kurtz is just a piece of Coppola's Kurtz, and the rest can be found in this poem if you go looking for it. The Hollow Men actually opens with an epigraph that was pulled directly from Heart of Darkness, reading, "Mr. Kurtz, he dead," said by the manager's boy to inform everyone that Kurtz has died. In Conrad's novella, Kurtz is described as hollow at the core. The poem illustrates men who are essentially empty inside, who are only filled with what is as meaningless as straw. They have no real purpose or conviction. They borrow others' beliefs without thinking for themselves, and they are too afraid or numb to take action. Kurtz is seemingly reading this poem to taunt or challenge Willard, someone who has been made into a tool by the military and whose moral center was given to him by a society and military structure that claims to be morally superior to its enemy. But here's the underlying twist. Kurtz isn't trying to turn Willard into a disciple. He's trying to turn Willard into someone worthy of killing him. Kurtz wants to be killed, not by a hollow man given this task by his hollow superiors for a hollow society, but by someone who understands the horror and cruelty of it and accepts that it needs to be done. This has been Kurtz's aim the entire time.
If I were to give you this weapon, would you kill me?
Yes.
Why? Why?
When Kurtz asks why, he isn't asking why kill him at all. He wants to see if Willard accepts the real reasons.
There's no difference between right and wrong.
Oh, yes. A world of difference. It's wrong to lose, it's right to win. It's wrong to be inside those cages. It's right to be outside.
I'm wrong and you're right.
Yes.
So why the fuck don't you just shoot me now and get it over with?
He drops Chef's head into Willard's lap, not to intimidate him, but to show him what it looks like to act without hesitation or guilt. He did it simply to further his goal. He reads from Time magazine to force Willard to question the system that gave this mission meaning, a sense of hypocritical righteous justice.
And after that, his ideas, methods became unsound.
And they call me an assassin. What do you call it when the assassins accuse the assassin?
And now, he's reading the poem to challenge Willard's sense of self. He doesn't want Willard to turn into another mindless disciple, and we see this contrast as the photojournalist tries to explain Kurtz as if he understands. In the Workprint, Kurtz reads the poem out loud and the photojournalist can't help but maniacally repeat what is said and talk to Willard all throughout it as if he understands what's profound about it.
Gesture without motion.
Paralyzed pose. Gesture without motion. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? It's a great man.
The reason that you're explaining the poem to him is because you want to indicate to this guy that he does not understand Kurtz, that Kurtz is a strange man. What you're trying to express is that he's kind of in the twilight zone. that his Twilight Zone is our Twilight Zone. It's America's Twilight Zone. So that he will not judge him. So that he will accept him as a great man and help him.
Then the photojournalist expresses his torment that he can't take Kurtz's picture.
Star. Sure, I can do it right now. I can do it now. I hear the click. And that hollow belly, this broken jaw. I want to picture kingdom. I want to end it.
What's funny is that at one point, he even realizes that he doesn't know his own name.
What's my name? What's my rotten fucking name?
You're Mutt. Banana?
Mutt. B? B?
This was probably just improv by Dennis Hopper getting a little too meta because his character doesn't really have a name. In the Workprint, Kurtz goes on to read the entire poem, which ends with the famous lines, "This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper." In the context of Apocalypse Now, this can apply in multiple ways. The end of what Kurtz built, his followers simply learn that Kurtz has been killed and watch as his killer slowly leaves them behind. The end of Kurtz himself, laying there whispering, the horror, as he waits for an airstrike that will never come. And the end of the Vietnam War, ending not with a decisive victory or defeat, but a slow decay and abandonment.
This is the way the fucking world ends. Look at this fucking shit we're in, man. Not with a bang. Whimper, and with a whimper, I'm fucking splitting, Jack.
I was in there with him for days. Not under guard. I was free.
Coppola's idea of who Kurtz was and how to end this movie was changing yet again. Kurtz started as Milius's war-hardened macho man, became the broken shell from Heart of Darkness, and changed again when Brando arrived overweight, unprepared, and unwilling to shoot. Coppola needed Brando, not because he was a box office draw, but because he was still, in Coppola's eyes, the best. Brando had taken a chance on Coppola when he was just an ambitious director fighting for control of The Godfather. But here, with Apocalypse Now, it was Coppola's turn to bet everything on Brando. But betting on Brando meant playing by his rules. Brando refused to memorize lines. He used cue cards or an earpiece to get the lines in the moment and keep his performance spontaneous.
It saved me a lot of time. Then I had things I'd much rather do other than studying the fucking line.
Coppola had already experienced this method with Brando on The Godfather. But this next scene would be completely different. Everything in the movie and the production had been building to this point where Brando would need to communicate not just Kurtz's motivation, but the entire thesis statement of the movie, as elusive as it had been to Coppola. Brando and Coppola had spent costly days discussing Kurtz and the movie's meaning. With no script, Brando would improvise, and Coppola would have no choice but to roll the cameras and hope.
He knew more about what I was going to do than I did.
Everything that Brando had done in his career had been working to this moment. Years earlier, he had an epiphany about acting, not in preparation or technique, but in how the audience completes the illusion. After winning an Oscar for On the Waterfront, he was disappointed in his performance, but realized that its power came not from him, but how the audience connected with it. The emotion wasn't just in his acting, but in what the audience brought to the scene.
The audience will lend themselves to the subject. They will create things that are not there.
And it is true that he really does work with little cue cards, and they're everywhere, absolutely everywhere. They're in the bread. He has lines. And when he said to me, he says, when I was upset in a dramatic scene that he was reading, he says, "Well, you like the taxi scene and On the Waterfront?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, the lines were all on the taxi."
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of a bum.
How he developed things is extraordinary. How actors develop style is very interesting. And Marlon's style of developing style of acting is very interesting for those who are interested really in movies. Marlon developed a style of acting because in some strange way, he either didn't want to because of his method upbringing, everything should be real, his lines, or else he actually couldn't remember. But he couldn't remember lines. Now, whether it was because he didn't want to or he couldn't. So what he would do is he'd do a scene with you, and he'd have, like, that's the camera there, say here, and he would have beside the camera a big board. And the lines would be on the board, you see. And that's how he developed that terrific look, that great Brandonian look. As he's talking to you in a scene, and suddenly he will do this. Right? That's because he's looking at the lines. He's reading the lines. Do you remember once? It's true, I promise. And I would have thought that one time, you know, when he was doing Julius Caesar? This probably happened because there's one marvelous part in Julius Caesar where this happens, and he's there and he's standing up in his toga, and he's doing. He says, "Almighty Caesar, dost thou lie so low? Art all thy glories, triumphs, spoils shrunk to this little measure?
Very well. I know not, gentlemen, what you intend.
He doesn't have a good memory, really.
well, there you go.
You know, and his whole acting style is sort of based on him reaching for the line. Like he'll say something like that, and he is really seriously.
He's just looking for notes.
He's trying to remember the line.
Yeah.
But he is very extreme. What he says about acting in one sentence is, you can't care, or they'll see it on your face. And so he approaches it with total relaxation, and he's wonderful.
Just as you do. But there are reasons why you must have no part in what is going to happen with someone that you absolutely trust, guaranteeing your safety. And at that meeting...
Absolutely, that kind of actor who is so relaxed and so secure, really all he wants from a director is, he said to me, Francis, say more angry or less angry.
But Apocalypse Now was different. This time, Brando wasn't just reaching for lines, he was reshaping the movie in real time, and Coppola had no idea if it would work.
He broke from them, and then he broke from himself.
Among the cue cards used on Apocalypse Now, Brando also used an earpiece, where he could play a tape of his improvisations.
Then he didn't like to memorize lines, so he'd read it, and he had a little thing in his ear with a tape recorder so he could trigger what he had said before and get the lines that way,
He would get the suggestion of a line or an idea, and then mold it during the scene.
They had definite points that he was supposed to make, and he then kind of created around those points and kind of gives it that reality. He put it on a piece of tape on one of the props nearby so that he sort of has to look for that line and sort of give it that little edge of struggle that, just like we have in our own conversation, I don't know exactly what line I'm going to say next, and it gives my voice a kind of edgy reality because I'm sort of fishing for what the next line is going to be, and he does that. It's part of his technique to not learn his lines and just spit them out slickly, but to really just have to have that little edge of reaching for them.
Brando was known for his natural style in an era of theatrical acting. Dustin Hoffman said that Brando would casually chat with the crew after action was called, only starting the scene when it felt as natural as the conversation. While he was often regarded as one of the best film actors of all time, Brando was emphatic that anyone could do it, and that everyone acts every day by not revealing their true feelings. After shooting the rain scene, they moved to the temple to film what became Kurtz's final monologue. Brando placed cue cards around the set and wore an earpiece connected to a tape recorder behind him. He'd play his own improvised lines, pause, then continue the scene, completely in control. Cinematographer Vittorio Storaro set up 2 cameras right next to each other so that when the first one ran out, he could start the second one while the first was being reloaded. When everything was ready, Coppola called action, and Brando started talking about the American Midwest, Kurtz's military career, and then reached back and turned on the tape recorder. After 15 seconds, he said, "Okay, stop," and Coppola said, "Marlon, you have to stop the tape," and Brando said, "I know that, I'm not talking to you." Brando continued talking about honor and the power of government and his military command. While filming, Coppola asked what bloodlust is, and Brando riffed on it while eating.
What is the bloodlust?
They say that the human animal is the only one that has bloodlust. Killing without purpose, killing for pleasure. You can see light through this. You take the others who are made to think but who can't act. You take I swallowed a bug.
It's interesting to get a chance to see the process of an incredible actor and the stuff that didn't work. They kept switching the cameras and reloading the other while Brando talked about everything from truth and beauty to justice.
Why are we in Vietnam?
It's our time to teach. Huh?
After 45 minutes, Brando's tape ran out and he said, "That's the end of the tape. I can't say anything else."
I can't think of any more dialogue today. I wanted to tear my teeth out. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I want to remember it. I never want to forget it.
And I felt myself coming apart, splitting in two, and it scared me. And then I said to myself, why are you so frightened? Let the fear take you.
But they had the strength.
In his book, Zeismer wrote, "No one knew if we had just witnessed one of the great performances of an illustrious career, or a nice experiment that didn't quite work. All in all, the camera was reloaded 5 times, and boom mic operator Nate Boxer held the large boom pole above his head for 45 minutes straight." Storaro asked Coppola if they should go again, and they did.
If I did an improvisation every day between Marlon Brando and Marty Sheen, would I at that time have more magical and in a way telling moments than if I just close down for 3 weeks and write a structure that then they act? And the answer would be, I'm much better off to do an improvisation every day.
Brando said, "It was probably the closest I've ever come to getting lost in a part, and one of the best scenes I've ever played, because I had to hold myself together. I made it up extemporaneously, bringing up images like a snail crawling along the edge of a razor."
I watched a snail crawl along the edge of a straight razor. That's my dream. It's my nightmare.
"I was hysterical. Francis shot it twice, 2 45-minute improvisations, but used hardly any of the footage in the picture." After all the delays, working with Brando reinvigorated Coppola. He told Eleanor Brando was the greatest actor he'd ever met, improvising for hours and turning Kurtz into the larger-than-life figure the movie needed. But then something very interesting happened. Zeismer asked Brando why he was mumbling his dialogue when he doesn't in real life. Brando said it was so he could have the last performance. When Zeismer asked what he meant, Brando said, "When the scene is all cut together in the movie and all finished, I come in and loop my lines any way I want. I have the final performance before it goes into the theaters. If I see something I want to change in my performance, I can. No one else can, but I can. I have the final performance." Brando had controlled every facet of the Kurtz character, from the script to the performance, and now he had ensured that he would maintain that control even after the movie was edited. So Coppola was left with 2 45-minute improvised monologues from Brando, and he would have to figure out what to put in the movie and how to make it fit. Luckily, Brando and Storaro employed an idea that made cutting it together much easier. Before filming, Brando remembered a scene in Last Tango in Paris, in which Storaro stood in front of a light and slowly made a shadow over him during a close-up.
Then I used to have to milk a cow.
He wanted Storaro to do the same thing here, so that it would be like truth emerging from matter. But the shadows also provided edit points for distilling all that dialogue down to a relatively short and impactful monologue to lead into Kurtz's death scene. But new technology also allowed for some artificial shadows.
But fortunately, Vittorio had this shadow going back and forth. And it was the first scene I really cut electronically, going back to when that was. And what I did is I sort of cobbled that whole thing that he said, but it was made out of lots of pieces. And then whenever there was the cut, the shadow went and hit it.
Coppola said, "What I did was to go through it and I took little pieces of the speech, a phrase here, a sentence there, a moment now, a moment there, and then I edited it into the final monologue, and then used a kind of shadow wipe effect so you could erase the cuts. This was all achieved on a very early electronic editing machine constructed at Zoetrope." Brando called in sick on September 30th and October 1st and 5th, but aside from that, the mood around the set had lifted enough for producer Fred Roos to send a telex to a United Artists executive to say that things are running smoothly for this final leg of the production. In the final version of the monologue that ends up in the movie, Kurtz lectures Willard about making friends with horror, as we see Kurtz's failure, Colby, practicing Tai Chi. He tells a story of a barbaric act that horrified him, but also caused an epiphany, that the will to do what is needed to win without hesitation, guilt, or compassion is where real power comes from.
And if I were to be killed in Willard,
I would want someone to go to my home and tell my son everything.
And through this, Willard has finally become who Kurtz needs him to be, a man worthy of killing him. In an alternate ending, Willard would go to visit Kurtz's home, but that's a story for next time. But now that Willard has become that killer, he needs to kill Kurtz. But how?
The questions that I kept facing or running into this stupid script about 4 guys going out to kill a guy, that was the story. But the questions that story kept putting me, I couldn't answer. Yet I knew that I had constructed the film in such a way that to not answer would be to fail.
My problem with Apocalypse is I realized that I had started to go on a route of making the movie more surreal, and I had no ending because the ending was very typical, the bridge of, a war movie ending, big battle and what have you, and I had no ending, and I was very terrified about my situation.
Sizemore saw that Coppola was really looking worn down and thought that shooting with Brando was taking its toll on him. He told Coppola that he was scared about the ending sequence, and Coppola agreed. Sizemore didn't know what would happen when Martin Sheen arrived, and Coppola said, "What can I do? Marty will kill Kurt somehow. I don't know." Sizemore stressed that they needed an ending, and Coppola said, "We'll film a bunch of improvs until Marlon has to go, then we'll kill Kurt somehow. And that's the end. Don't worry, I'll fix it in the editing room. I always do."
Everybody wanted me to do it. Him most of all. I felt like he was up there, waiting for me to take the pain away.
On the next episode of Making Apocalypse Now, we finally reach the climax of the movie, where Kurtz is killed, and we'll go into the story behind this shot and how Coppola managed to pull off one of the most memorable endings in movie history. This episode's companion PDF features some more information on the Hollow Men, as well as Brando's account of his time on Apocalypse Now in his autobiography, which completely goes against what everyone else said happened. It's just $1 and it really helps the channel. You can also get it right now on Patreon at the $1 level, as well as access to ad-free versions of all of my videos. But hurry, because the companion PDF will go into the $5 archive when my next video goes up.